Hello and welcome to this week's Why Football podcast with me, Michael Dryden, and Etches Adokru. How are you, Etches?
Yeah, good, thanks. Last week I was quite downbeat about the Arsenal City game. We obviously won. Huh?
Are you a downbeat?
Yeah, downbeat. I wasn't happy because I thought we were going to lose, but...
Right, okay. Our pre-game.
Yeah, pre-game, but post-game. Won that 2-0, come on the boys. That was big. It's been a bit of a roller coaster because we beat Liverpool a few days beforehand, and then we played Villa, and yeah, it was actually one of the worst games of football I've watched us play all season. So that the hype has come back down on the scale again.
It's Arsenal, isn't it? Sporting Arsenal.
Yep.
That's what happens.
Yeah. So that was last week as well. Also, I've seen Dynamo Zagreb and Ipswich Town have the exact same kit. I don't know why I find that so funny. It's just, how is that happening? Literally the exact same stencil, the exact same kit colour, different badges.
You find that, especially at international level, you get like these manufacturers just make the same kit. Out.
Which is a bit outrageous. Apart from the usual this week, what are your thoughts on Hendo winning Football Writers?
Yeah, over the moon, mate. King of Sunderland, mate. So, what more can I say?
Yeah, I know Big Lee, Barry Catamol, and Jordan Hendo are close to your heart.
Lee Catamol is pioneering, so
Correct.
in his position. So, as I've touched on earlier pods,
You have indeed.
Yeah.
Thoughts on Roy Keane as manager of Sunderland?
Actually, he was very good.
Really?
And which is interesting because obviously he didn't work out at Ipswich.
Yeah.
Has not came back to managerial positions and not performed.
Sure enough.
But so basically we lost the first 5 games of the season under Quinn as manager.
Yeah.
So he was like chairman, led a consortium, came back. We lost the first 5 games. Keane came in and mate, we won the championship, mate. Losing your first 5 games and then winning the championship. It's like when De Boer was at Palace.
Yeah.
It's like him then going win the Premier League. I mean, not quite the same.
Yeah, we'll stop that one there because Dryden's beginning to tear up. But how are you doing in general, Dryden?
Not bad at all. Lockdown season, which is brilliant. Saw Jude Bellingham move to Dortmund, another English player to go to Germany and go to Dortmund in particular. Birmingham retired number 22 number, which I thought was interesting. I just think it's an empty gesture, man, because I know it's not like something you find in football often to retire numbers, but if it was the number 9 or number 7 shirt,
it's never getting retired.
He's not going to retire, are they? It's like, I'm going to retire number 85.
He played 41 games for Birmingham.
Which is brilliant. I mean, he played a number of them games while 16, which is unheard of in the English game because even at the championship level, Premier League, we've touched on before, is a lot of short-term incentives. You can't risk playing a 16-year-old because if you then lose and you get relegated, the club can be in free fall. It's the same in the championship because the prize is the Premier League. So it's similar. It's not obviously the same extent, but to play play that many games at 16 is incredible.
Yeah.
This week, Etches will be looking into what the financial fair play regulations actually are, why they were brought into the game, and whether FFP is still fit for purpose. Before we start, please follow us on Twitter at yfootball_ for our latest content. Please also follow and subscribe with us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Acast for immediate access to future episodes. So, Etches, why are you looking into this topic?
Yeah, well, recently in the news, as many people know, Manchester City successfully appealed their Champions League expulsion. So the topic of FFP is back in football mainstream. For those of you that don't know specifically, Manchester City were banned for 2 seasons and fined 30 million for manipulating sponsor contracts in an attempt to deceive UEFA and not fall foul of the FFP.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. To not fall foul of the regulations. FFP is kind of one of those terms which all football fans have heard of, all football fans know, but don't necessarily specifically know what it is or how it works. So I thought for this pod, we'd kind of look into that, as well as touching on whether, that term is FFP actually dead. No,
absolutely. It's a term that kind of gets thrown about quite a lot, but I feel as if like a lot of people actually don't know the ins and outs. I certainly don't. My assumption's always been that it was brought in to prevent a club and its owner from spending vast sums in a short space of time, racking up debt and putting the club itself, the fans, and even the league in jeopardy, or just being kind of unfair to the others who haven't got that kind of capital. So what actually is FFP?
Yeah, so the Financial Fair Play Regulations, or FFP for short, was agreed in principle in 2009 by UEFA. A study was actually ran by UEFA which showed that 59% of clubs were losing money, with 20% actually in financial peril. So FFP was agreed, and Michel Platini, the former UEFA boss, said that this would help clubs prevent from embarking on financial doping. An example of financial doping would be at AC Milan, where former owner Silvio Berlusconi supported them financially for roughly 120 million between 2007 to 2010. What the FFP rules actually mean is that clubs can spend a certain amount more than what their revenue is. So in last year's rules, that would mean that clubs can spend up to 4.5 million more than they earn over the 3-year assessment period, which goes up to 30 million if their owners can prove that they can cover the cost. Football expenditures like transfers and wages must be balanced with TV and matchday revenue, plus money from commercial activities. Investments in stadiums, training facilities, youth development, and women's football aren't included in the calculations.
Yeah, it seems positive. I didn't realise that those investments aren't included in that, which is good because I mean the club can still grow seemingly, just not throwing money at the team.
Exactly.
It might take some time as well for an owner to do so as well. So an owner that is actually coming in actually wants to grow the club, can do so, which is good. And City are an example of that. They invested heavily in infrastructure projects, community projects. They've also took money at the team as well. But yeah, it's a good point.
Failure to comply leads to sanctions which include transfer bans, fines, withholding prize money, and expulsion from European competitions. This is policed by the Financial Control Body, which was also set up by UEFA. Interestingly, some leagues actually had rules in place before FFP was brought in, like Liga and the Bundesliga, but it was a big culture shock for the Prem, La Liga, and Serie A, where clubs were racking up some serious debt.
How was FFP originally viewed by the fans and clubs?
Yeah, at the time, in 2009, it wasn't specifically called for by fans, but, especially in England, Leeds' fall from grace is still, in memory. For those of you that don't know, in short, Leeds spent over their means, basically banking on Champions League qualification to balance the books. That didn't happen, and it was just a fire sale, summer after summer. And then they had their massive fall from grace, but they're back.
They are back.
Yeah, elite clubs were initially reluctant in backing it before it was actually widely backed by all of them. Some of the main believers in the project were Roman Abramovich of Chelsea and Monsieur Arsene Wenger. Wenger recently claimed that the big sides eventually agreed with FFP as they felt it protected them from emerging challenger clubs who wanted a seat at the so-called big table.
Yeah.
Jose Mourinho, another great manager, in 2014 complained that the old established sides were against Chelsea as their elite status is still fairly new. So there's a theme of getting in here where big old clubs, Munich, Juventus, possibly Arsenal, Man United, aren't really happy to see anyone else come into that circle. City and PSG spending had actually riled a few clubs who have often complained to the authorities. Arsenal are rumoured to be the main instigator in City's most recent UEFA investigation.
The snitch.
Oh, I've got a lot of time for it. Can't catch them on the field, so we've got to do it some way.
Absolutely not.
Both City and PSG have been sanctioned for breaches in an attempt to reach the elite status, which they've managed to do. But it's clear from what I said earlier that the large sides aren't happy with the way they've achieved it.
Yeah, it seems hypocritical from Roman Abramovich, given Chelsea's rise in the early 2000s when they spent. I suppose that they didn't spend the levels that are now spent, but it is kind of relative to the time. At the time, they were spending far more than the clubs, which is kind of what the rules brought in to prevent. Staying with high elite European football, if you look at League One clubs, for example, every team's self-serving. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're Blackpool, you're Sunderland, or you're Manchester City, every team's self-serving. So Blackpool voted against the league starting again. Or a lot of these clubs cited financial reasons. They can't afford to put games on. They haven't got the revenue from TV. If fans aren't coming through the doors, and they signed a player for reportedly a 6-figure sum. So it just goes to show how self-serving these teams are, and to an extent, rightly so. you've got to look after your club because obviously they've got staff, they've got players that could lose their jobs, things like that. It makes sense.
Who was the player that Blackpool signed?
Jerry Yates.
Okay.
Yeah, he used to play for PSG, I think.
How many stars on Football Manager?
He's probably, I don't know, he's probably like a 65 on FIFA. I'd probably be an 89 on FIFA. You'd probably be like 64, pace 13, you think? Pretty good.
20 determination though.
On FIFA.
Oh, FIFA. Put me in Football Manager. FIFA, oof. I'd style myself around Wes Morgan.
Okay, he's pretty quick.
Yeah.
Mourinho actually recently complained about the UEFA decision to overturn City's ban, referring to it as disgraceful. He didn't suggest why in practice, other than that the penalty either should be enforced or completely overturned, rather than issuing a 10 million fine, which would make sense. However, the fine was actually for not cooperating with UEFA, so that was the one part of the decision that wasn't overturned, was their refusal to cooperate, so they got fined that 10 million. So has FFP been successful?
Yeah, well, UEFA claimed that since its introduction, the following 5 years, club debt had decreased, with club balance sheets strengthening significantly and net debt plunging from 65% to 35%. The facts there clearly show that FFP has some benefits and silence the doubters who believe the project was too ambitious or challenging to implement. Information on whether that debt revenue has continued to drop is actually scarce. It's quite hard to find, but that's still quite encouraging from the beginning anyway. Yeah. Even though net debt revenue has dropped, it's hard to say whether FFP is benefiting everyone or it's still just for the elite. So earlier we mentioned City and PSG are always in the headlines when it comes to FFP normally, but who else has actually fallen foul of the FFP regulations? Well, when back in 2010, Malaga were taken over by a Qatari owner who heavily invested in the club, bringing in the likes of Santi Cazorla for, at the time, was their club record fee. Fantastic player, fantastic person.
Take a corner with both feet, got so much time for it.
And free kicks. As well as Jeremy Toulon. But after coming fourth in the Liga, having spent 80 million in 2011, the club were banned from European football due to outstanding debt. AC Milan, who we have a pod on, just check that out, were banned from the Europa League for overspending under their previous owner, Lee Yong-hong. Galatasaray were also banned from European competitions for a similar thing back in 2016. A whole host of sides have received numerous fines since FFP's introduction. The more well-known ones are PSG, who have been fined 60 million euros, 40 of that was suspended, and they had their CL squad reduced and transfer restrictions put in place in 2014. And City had another fine before this of 60 million. Again, 40 million of that was suspended. Clubs like Dynamo Zagreb, Zenit St. Petersburg, Atletico Madrid have also received fines as well.
Yeah, that Malaga team in 2011, 2012 had some absolute unbelievable players. So Monreal, Isco, Rondon, Caballero were all that team. Julio Baptiste.
The Beast.
The legend, the Beast.
What a nickname.
And obviously Cazorla, Ruud van Nistelrooy, Joaquin. They must have spent quite a lot of money then.
Yeah,
big wages there.
Yeah.
Julio is not cheap. Pellegrini was manager as well. So, that was before it became largely relevant. But, it's a big wage bill.
Yeah, very much so.
So are there issues with FFP?
Well, as I touched on earlier, it's seen as a set of regulations which benefit the elite. The reason for that is if clubs can only spend within their means, the already established clubs can spend more money on potential transfers compared to those trying to bridge the gap. Questionable sponsorship deals is another problem as well. So since FFP's introduction, more clubs have gotten creative with their sponsorship deals. For example, it's not just the standard kit sponsors you see on the front, it's the training kit sponsors, it's the match day sponsors, the bus sponsors. For example, Manchester United have an official pillow and mattress partner called Millie. I'm just like, I'll just leave that there. Like, why? Is there anything? So that again shows the advantage that bigger clubs have who are much more marketable compared to QPR.
It's weird of getting cash through the doors.
Exactly. I doubt QPR have a pillow and mattress sponsor partner.
Probably not Sunderland either.
Exactly. A massive grey area with these deals is when teams like PSG and City have companies linked to their ownership involved in the sponsorship agreements, like Etihad Airways for Manchester City. UEFA are always adamant, though, that these deals are thoroughly reviewed.
Yeah, another one that was in the headlines was when Mancini was manager. Allegedly, he was offered a separate arrangement to get around FFP. So that arrangement was his actual salary was 1.45 million with City when he joined in 2009, plus bonuses. However, he allegedly got a 1.7 million salary on top with Al Jazeera. That's according to the football leaks that came out. That was reported by Der Spiegel. And getting back to the actual decision itself by Acast, they stated that the charges were either unproven or been time barred, meaning that they stemmed from at least 5 years before the subsequent case. It brings into question the intent behind the ban. Then, were UEFA always aware it would be overturned? You'd think, if a lot of the charges are getting removed because of time barring, surely their attorneys, they would be aware of this, or they would have been aware at the time that it was a factor. Maybe not. And the charges around the sponsorship could not be proven, seemingly. But was that influenced largely by the fact that City was so uncooperative?
Yeah.
But I just think the whole thing kind of, at the end of the day, the CAS, the competition arbitration sport, they overturned it, not UEFA. However, just bring into question, were UEFA always kind of aware they'd be overturned?
Yeah, that's a really good point. You'd hope not, but it's kind of like a symbolic sanction, because UEFA, from the outside, it kind of seems like they knew City would win, but it's like, oh, hey, we still tried to ban them, so it doesn't matter. But that's a discussion we can have later on. Another smaller issue not widely discussed with FFP is the different tax rates in countries, meaning that some clubs have to pay much higher gross wages in order for the player to be left with the same net salary as if he belonged in another country or to another club in another country. Yep. And finally, there's an issue around big clubs preferring these big fines that PSG and City have received over being expelled from the competition. Where is the deterrent from UEFA to ensure that sides don't continuously reoffend? This is City's second offence, PSG's first, because they all have the money to cover these fines. Yeah. So,
cash is not a problem.
Exactly. I mean, if I breach FFP to buy Neymar, for example, and I win the Champions League and the treble, and I get fined 60 million, I don't care.
Yeah.
Because I've essentially won all the trophies and I've kept Neymar, and all you're doing is fining me a fee I'd normally pay for a fullback.
Yeah.
So,
no, absolutely, mate.
They really need to kind of have that sort of deterrent to stop that.
So, as reported, is FFP dead?
Yeah, the City ruling has left many thinking that FFP is in fact a pointless set of regulations, which the biggest and richest don't have to adhere to. Clearly it has loads of benefits. Clubs have reduced their debt overall, but is FFP really benefiting all clubs, or is it just for the elite? Is it in fact dead? I think that FFP needs a shake-up. If you look at the European domestic leagues, Juventus are on the verge of their 9th Scudetto in a row. Bayern Munich have just wrapped up their 8th in a row. And Real Madrid and Barca have won all but one of the last 16 La Liga titles. The argument against what I've just said is that, these sides have always been dominant throughout history, which is true. What we are seeing, though, is because of the money disparity in the game, these sides are becoming much more dominant than ever before, and the gap is widening. What we're seeing across European football is the leagues are becoming very predictable, which makes football as a sport less interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very interesting debate. Like, many clubs throw money at their team chasing a prize, generally. So even the Championship, the EFL has its own regulations, but look at the sums some Championship clubs are throwing about. Just because that prize of getting in the Premier League is so big, that windfall is so high. And it's arguably the same at elite level. Failure could mean debt and ruin for the club and the fans, who are the real losers. Leeds is the classic example you've touched on. Threw money at the UCL dream and then plummeted to League One, could have went out of business. However, it's clear the elite do want to preserve their position. We've seen that before with the European Super League proposal that came in. So the elite are the winners, but also are UEFA the winners as well? What about their agenda? UEFA's success and relevance, its longevity, is largely based on the sustained commerciality of the Europa League, the Champions League, and this future Super League if it comes in. So do they actually care about the little man, or are they interested in making sure that Europe remains this dominant, relevant kind of competition in football, as opposed to the growing markets in, say, South America or China or India or further afield?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point that you touched on. Yeah, you would hope that FFP kind of cares for everyone, but there are darker interests there in terms of
maybe it's skeptical, but yeah,
there's definitely darker interest there in terms of do they actually care about the little men, as you said, or is it just more about the big clubs because they're the ones that really fund them, and they're the ones with the biggest say. So the topic here is whether FFP is in fact dead, and I mentioned that we need, it needs a shake-up. So how do you actually revive it? Arsene Wenger, who's actually now head of development at FIFA, mentioned potentially relaxing FFP to allow new sides to have greater investment in order to compete. He highlighted that these super sides, Munich, Man United, etc., became massive when FFP didn't exist, and back then it didn't stop those clubs from emerging and becoming the dominant forces that they are. He feels that if clubs are still monitored properly and the funds are verified, FFP should be more flexible to facilitate greater investment within the game, which is a really interesting kind of point because, we now see very few investors, or if they do come in, it's in a very weird way to try and get around FFP. It'd be interesting to see how the game would develop if that was completely relaxed. Could West Ham then suddenly become champions? Could Newcastle's one's impending, could happen to Sunderland. The possibilities are endless. Another way to revive FFP is just tougher sanctions on repeat offenders. From a fan view, from a club view, it kind of feels like one rule for us and one rule for the rest, being the big clubs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it'd be really easy in terms of legislation. Okay, no matter what happens in the first time you do it, they can go to court. You offend twice, ban. Doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter whether you were £1 over FFP or you did something else, like automatic ban. And then I think that will make smaller clubs believe in the system again. And the final point on that is, if either of the above don't occur, I think what we could really see and what's in danger of FFP at the moment is just more successful sides just bending the rules.
Yeah.
Like, what stops Juventus now thinking, well, okay, what happens if you break this? It should get a £30 million fine. They might just do it anyway, and then if they're winning, if they're successful, they win the double, treble, or whatever it may be, they won't really care.
The brand of the clubs is bigger than the competition.
Exactly.
They've outgrown it, and that's why they can do what they want, because they know they drive that brand and they drive the commerciality.
Exactly.
It baffles me that there are not heavier and more severe sanctions for those that repeat their offence, as you say. Like it's you're just literally dishing out a fine to a club or an owner or whatever that doesn't care about fines repeatedly. But the gap between the elite anyway is just so huge. Like, it's difficult to see how clubs can bridge that in any case. The market is so saturated with capacity. Even if there was no FFP, is there room to grow? There's only so many Champions League spots in the Premier League. There's only so many Champions League spots generally. Only so many knockout positions to go into with that windfall. So is there space to grow? I mean, we touched on it on a previous pod. Like, in my opinion, there's just not space to enter that elite. So you can chuck any amount of money at it. All you can do is inflate the market and not achieve it. Because these clubs are so massive.
Yeah, I think it's the idea behind someone gets squeezed out. It's a revolving door where there isn't space, but there's always someone circling the drain who then comes back out. Arsenal are a good example. We've not been in the Champions League now for 5 seasons maybe, and we're kind of falling out of that circle.
Mid-table club, you'd say now.
Mid-table club.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say probably a mid-table club. Not as big as Sunderland though.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, what is it? League One? League Two?
League One, yeah.
League One. Okay, fine. Sorry. But it's kind of like, there's always clubs being pushed out. AC Milan, Inter Milan are coming back to it now.
That's true.
So whenever we have City come in or PSG come in, someone's coming out at the same time.
Fair enough. So that's all from us. Thank you to Etchez for doing the research.
No worries.
And thank you for tuning in to this week's Why Football podcast. Please don't forget to follow us on Twitter, whyfootball_. And please also follow and subscribe with us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Acast for immediate access.
Brand new on Acast.
Brand new on Acast for access to future episodes. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.